You're welcome to the study section 5 of ANA 212 Regional Anatomy. We'll be discussing the thorax. The thorax is the superior part of the trunk between the neck and abdomen. The thoracic cavity surrounded by the thoracic wall contains the heart, lungs, thymus, distal part of the trachea, and most of the esophagus. It is conical in shape, being narrow above and broad below, flattening from before backward and longer behind than in front. It is somewhat reinformed on transverse section due to the projection of the vertebral bodies into the cavity. In this study section, you will be introduced to the thoracic cage, the sternum, the ribs, the costal cartilages, and the intercostal space. When you will have studied this study section 5, you should be able to describe the thoracic cage, identify and describe the sternum. You should be able to draw and describe the ribs. You should be able to describe the costal cartilages and enumerate the contents of intercostal space. Let's start with thoracic cage. The thoracic cage forms the thorax, that is the chest portion of the body. It consists of the 12 pairs of ribs with their costal cartilages and the sternum. The ribs are anchored posteriorly to the 12 thoracic vertebra, that is the T1 to T12. The thoracic cage protects the heart and the lungs. The thoracic cage is formed by the sternum and 12 pairs of ribs with their costal cartilages. The ribs are anchored posteriorly to the 12 thoracic vertebra. Joints of thoracic wall. Although movement of the thoracic wall are frequent during respiration, for example, the range of motion at the individual joints is small. Any disturbance that reduces the mobility of this joint interferes with respiration. Joints of the thoracic wall occur between the vertebra, that is intervertebral joint, ribs and vertebrae, that is costovertebral joint, joints of the heads of ribs, and the costotransverse joint, sternum and costal cartilage, that is sternocostal joint. Then we have a sternum and clavicle, that is sternoclavicular joint, ribs and costal cartilages, that is costochondral joint. Then the costal cartilages, that is interchondral joint. Part of the sternum, this is manubrosternal and ciphisternal joint. In young people, usually the manubrosternal joint and sometimes the ciphisternal joint are fused in elderly people. The intervertebral joints between the body of the adjacent vertebra are joined together by longitudinal ligament and intervertebral disc. Movement of thoracic wall. Movement of the thoracic wall and diaphragm during respiration increase the intrathoracic volume and diameters of the thorax. Consequently, pressure changes results in air being drawn into the lungs, that is inspiration, through the nose, the mouth, larynx, and the trachea. During passive expiration, the diaphragm, intercostal muscles, and other muscles relax, decreasing intrathoracic volume and increasing intrathoracic pressure, expelling air from the lungs, that is expiration, through the same passages. The stretched elastic tissue of the lung recoils, expelling most of the air. Concurrently, intra-abdominal pressure decreases and the abdominal viscera are depressed vertically, and transverse diameter are increased during inspiration. Thoracic cage widens during forced inspiration as the ribs are elevated. Thoracic cage narrows during expiration as the ribs are depressed. Observe the increase posterior and the transverse diameter. The middle part of the lower ribs move laterally when they are elevated. The anteroposterior diameter of the thorax is increased. A greater excursion occurs inferiorly. Differences between female and male thorax. The thorax of the female differs from that of the male as follows. In terms of capacity, that of the female is lesser. In terms, the sternum is shorter in female. The upper margin of the sternum is on a level with the lower part of the body of the thoracic vertebra, whereas in the male, it is on a level with the lower part of the body of the second vertebra. 4. The upper ribs are more movable in female and so allow a greater enlargement of the upper parts of the thorax. The sternum. The sternum is the elongated bony structure that anchors the anterior thoracic cage, measuring about 15 centimeters, that is 6 inches, located in the medial line of anterior thoracic wall. It consists 3 basic portions: the manubrium, that is the superior portion; the body, that is the middle portion and largest portion of the sternum; and the xiphoid process, that is the inferior and the smallest portion of the sternum. The junction of the manubrium and the body forms the sternal angle. The manubrium on its superior portion has a depressed called jugular, that is suprasternal notch. This can be easily felt at the anterior base of the neck between the medial ends of the clavicles. The ribs. Human being contains 12 pairs of ribs that make up the side of thoracic wall. Ribs increase in length from 1st through 7th and they decrease in length through 12th. Each rib posteriorly articulates with the body of its corresponding thoracic vertebra. The ribs are curved, flat bones that form most of the thoracic cage. They are remarkably light in weight, yet highly resilient. Each rib has a spongy interior containing bone marrow, which forms blood cells, that is hematopoietic tissue. Ribs classification. The bony ribs do not extend anteriorly completely around the sternum. Instead, each rib extends in a costal cartilage. These cartilages are made of hyaline cartilage and can extend for several inches. Most ribs are then attached either directly or indirectly to the sternum via the costal cartilage. The ribs are classified into 3 groups based on their relationship to the sternum. We have the true or vertebrocostal ribs, that is the 1st through 7th ribs, attached directly to the sternum through their own costal cartilages. Then we have 1st or vertebrochondral rib, that is the 8th through the 10th ribs. They are the 1st rib. They have cartilages that are joined to the cartilage of the ribs, just superior to them, thus their connection with the sternum is indirect. And then we have floating or free ribs, that is the 11th and 12th rib, sometimes the 10th rib. They have rudimentary cartilages that do not connect even indirectly with the sternum. Instead, they end in the posterior abdominal musculature. Ribs can also be classified as typical and atypical ribs. The costal cartilage. Costal cartilages prolong the ribs anteriorly and contribute to the elasticity of the thoracic wall. Intercostal spaces separate the ribs and their costal cartilages from one another. The spaces and neurovascular structures are named according to the rib forming the superior border of the space. That is, there are 11 intercostal spaces and 11 intercostal nerves. Note that 11 intercostal spaces and 11 intercostal nerves. The subcostal space is below the 12th rib, and the anterior ramus or spinal nerves T12 is the subcostal nerve. The costal cartilages are bars of hyaline cartilage which serves to prolong the raise forward and contributes very materially to the elasticity of the walls of the thorax. The first 7 pairs are connected with the sternum. The next 3 are each articulated with the lower border of the cartilage of the preceding rib. The last 2 have pointed extremities which end in the wall of the abdomen. Like the rib, the costal cartilage vary in their length, breadth, and direction. Contents of the intercostal space. Intercostal spaces are occupied by intercostal muscles, vessels, and nerves. Let's start with intercostal muscles. Typical intercostal spaces contain 3 layers of intercostal muscles. 1. The superficial layer is formed by the external intercostal muscles, these fiber bundles oriented inferior anteriorly. Then the middle layer is formed by the internal intercostal muscles, these fiber bundles oriented inferior posteriorly. The deepest layer is formed by the innermost intercostal muscles, similar to internal intercostals. Anteriorly, the fleshy external intercostal muscles are replaced by external intercostal membranes. Posteriorly, the fleshy internal intercostal muscles are replaced by internal intercostal membranes. The innermost intercostal muscles are found only at the most lateral parts of the intercostal spaces. The external intercostals are located laterally on the sides of the body. The internal intercostals are located medially near the sternum, while the innermost intercostal are located deep to both the internal and external intercostal. Thank you for listening. See you in the next class.